Are here live on Unify, and today I am so blessed and honored to introduce you to an extraordinary human being, Jonathan Granoff. Jonathan, welcome, and I'd like to share a little bit about you. Mr. Granoff is an attorney, author, and international advocate, emphasizing the legal and ethical dimensions of human development and security, with specific focus on advancing the role of law to address international security and threats posed by nuclear weapons. He serves on numerous governing and advisory boards, including Lawyers Committee on Nuclear Policy, Fortune Forum, Goodall Institute, and the NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace, and Security. Wow. And that's, let me tell you, you want to go to LinkedIn and read all of it, because that doesn't do you justice. You just, in the short time we have shared, I am enamored with your beautiful knowledge, and I'm excited for what you're going to bring forward right now. We'll start with your mission and what's behind it, and then we'll go into why is this initiative important?
The initiative you're talking about is the day of prayer, focusing on ending the threat of nuclear annihilation. Yes?
Yes. I apologize. I'm going to be cutting that out.
I just had to, there's so many issues that converge in this moment of history in which we are the first generation that has to decide that we will not be the last generation. We're also the first generation in which the admonition of the wise to treat the human family as one, which has always been a spiritual obligation, or not obligation, but a spiritual law, that you don't go and expand into the great mystery of universal love until you start to see that other lives are as important as your own, and that all lives are part of the larger web of life. Seeing that, understanding that, and understanding that honoring that is essential for one's own inner peace has been an admonition of the wise for a long time. It's expressed in the universality of the Golden Rule, for example. In the Upanishads, there's a quote that says, "The world is one family." That's literally over the parliament in Delhi for India. But these are oughts. These are things that we need to strive for. Just like in the United States, the ought that founds our country is we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, obviously, when that was stated, it was even less self-evident than it is today. Didn't include women, didn't include indigenous people or people of color. It didn't even include men, white men, who didn't have property. But now we know that within that statement was the seed that it includes everybody. And that has become a universal ought for the legitimacy of all governments. So stating the ought, that we must see the human family as one, has been a clear marker that the wise since time immemorial have told humanity. But never before this moment have we recognized that this is also a practical necessity. Never before have we had responsibilities to future generations as we do today. Never before have we developed the technology and social organization to melt the ice cap, to destroy the third lung that we all depend on, the phytoplankton from the oceans and the rainforests. Never before have we created weapons that can end humanity in an afternoon. So the spiritual insight and the practical necessity have come together in a unique moment. And you asked about me personally, I feel that knowing this with clarity, knowing this because I've been to the poorest parts of the world and seen the consequences of injustice, and it broke my heart. Knowing this because I've been to Greenland and I've seen hunks of ice the size of New York office buildings crashing into rivers that shouldn't be there, and billions of gallons the size of enormous rivers flushing into our oceans and changing the very pH of the oceans. I've seen the swarms of mosquitoes there that are destroying the caribou, that are destroying the culture of indigenous people that is 40, 50,000 years old because that changing of the climate. I've seen these things and I can't pretend that I haven't. And I've also seen and understand in the corridors of power the temptation to pursue power as an end in itself. I've seen that that we have a glut of weaponry in the United States, and our military budget continues to increase. I've seen that 30% of the children of both Pakistan and India are malnourished, and yet these countries are spending billions of dollars producing weapons they can't use. So my mission is to stay in accord with my conscience based on what I've seen, and to use the tools that God has given me and the opportunities that God has given me to make a difference, to honor and address the sanctity of that web of life that I know is contained with and through me and with and through you and all of the audience of people in Unify who are seeking unity with the source of all and everything feel. So my sort of, you asked my mission is my mission is to be true to conscience. And if I can do that, that'll be enough.
That's it. The sacred yes. Yes. The sacred yes is awesome. This is such a gratitude moment if everybody watching can just sit with it and feel into that heart connected space. This is important for all the reasons that Jonathan has already went over with us. We're seeing things right now that just obviously need to be corrected. And the way through that is unity through prayer and raising the vibration. So I would love to know, what can you offer to those listening as to what they can do within their own community, in their own home?
Well, I think this show is about the prayer. Prayer is important because prayer helps set the direction that we're going to go. But to quote the Dalai Lama, what he said in Hiroshima, one of the hats that I wear is I'm the senior advisor to the World Summits of Nobel Peace Laureates. So we were there together, and the evening before his speech, I gave a speech and a panel with him and Mikhail Gorbachev and Willem de Klerk, in which I talked about apologizing for the ignorance of the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the suffering that it caused. The next day, the Dalai Lama gave a speech at the memorial in which he said, prayer and meditation are absolutely essential for all of us, for our humanity. But God did not create nuclear weapons. We did, and we have to work to get rid of them. So it's contained in that. So prayer and meditation set the direction and compass point for our lives. It's what opens us up to harmony with the source of our own heartbeat, the source of our own breath, the source of consciousness itself, which is a mystery, unfathomably mysterious because it has no form. The thing that sees in your eyes, you can't see. The thing that touches in your hand, you can't touch. The thing that knows in your heart, you can't know as an object. But to come into harmony with it, prayer and meditation is needed. And part of the process of authentic prayer is that connectivity through compassion with other lives. And if you have any sense of compassion, the idea that we would spend trillions of dollars to develop weapons that can cause immeasurable suffering has to offend you. You have to say, this is not right. Because if this is right, if this is acceptable, then what isn't acceptable? I mean, just imagine, people who want to ban abortions, okay? Because they say that fetuses are sacred. I believe they are sacred. But imagine if you had a spray that you could go into a town and spray it and all the fetuses would die. People would be just, imagine how offended they would be if there was some chemical weapon that could do that. Right?
What a brilliant point.
But nuclear weapons destroy every dog, every cat, every snake, every human being within a 16-mile radius in a firestorm of suffering. And we know what they do. Imagine if the Biological Weapons Convention said, no country can use polio or smallpox as a weapon, but we'll let 9 countries use the plague as a weapon. We would say that's morally incomprehensible. It's unsustainable. And we won't tolerate it. But that's exactly what we have with nuclear weapons. So if you're going to take on an issue that matters for the survival of humanity, you better be grounded deeply in the source of goodness within yourself, because you will be assailed by the world. You will not be popular. You will not gain wealth, and you will not gain recognition. What you will gain is a clear conscience. And only people who go into themselves, into the heart, know the value of a clear conscience, know the value that comes from prayer. Because what comes from prayer, if it's true prayer, is love and an expanded heart resonating with compassion. And the consequence of that is wanting to serve. And if you have that intention, I promise you, God will give you opportunities to serve. I'm not going to tell you how you serve that opening. It will come to you. It will come to you. You will have the opportunity. And the consequence of bringing that compassion into action is a deep inner peace, a deep clarity of conscience. And the consequence of that deep clarity is another level of consciousness, an open space in which the mystery of grace can be received. Grace is always there, but you need to have the sail to catch the wind. It's like wind on the ocean. It's there, but the ship's not going to move lest the sail's open. So what opens the sail of the heart is bringing into action. Then this consciousness that we call wisdom, which is the ability to understand the nature of consciousness and the nature of the preciousness of life and the connectivity of life, is awakened. The consequence of that is deep gratitude. And in the gratitude is surrender, and his surrender is like the wave rolls down and it goes, aha, I am the ocean and I'm not separated from anything. And thus you have no fear, and thus you have peace. Not the peace that depends on circumstance, not the peace that dependent on avoiding blame and pursuing praise, but the peace that, as Jesus said, surpasseth understanding. The peace that's in the word Shanti, Salam, Shalom. The peace that God gives us as our birthright. And that's why prayer is so important.
And it doesn't matter what religion or who you call God or any of that. It's the connection to the divine energy. And my favorite way to get connected, I love that you said gratitude, but because that is one of my favorite ways, but grace is the fragrance of life. And it's such an important word. Can you expand on grace a little bit more?
Yes, grace is as present as gravity. But unless you have the organ that can perceive it, you don't know it. It's like, for example, the nature of the divine is forgiveness. But if you don't have a heart that has forgiveness, you won't know the nature of that mystery of what gives us life. As Jesus said, God is love. Well, you might believe God is love, but you won't know God is love unless you have a loving heart. The Prophet Muhammad said, if you take one step toward the divine, it takes 10 toward you. Well, obviously it doesn't physically take steps, but as we take steps toward those qualities, it then fills us with those qualities. This has to be authentic, and only, it's your own secret how authentic you are. And the consequence of the opening of that consciousness that is grounded in the open space of love and compassion is the perception of grace. But grace was always there. Every breath is grace. Life is graced. Every sunset and sunrise, and every flag of God's announcing its mystery, every leaf on every tree, if you understand, is like a flag for the divine. You see it because you see the miracle of being born in space and time and having consciousness and love. You see it, and then you go, that's grace. And why this day, setting aside this day, is so important is that collectively, we need to go in a new direction, a direction that puts loving people and using things instead of loving things and using people. And the state, every state, whether it's Russia, the United States, Chad, Argentina, whatever, these are things we create. Our identities of I'm a Jew, a Muslim, a Christian, an atheist, whatever, these are identities that we create. These are things, these are ideas or objects. They have a beginning and end. But the core of our humanity, the soul, isn't a thing. Where is it? Where's your consciousness? Where's it located? Where is your life force? It isn't a thing. It's not an object. It is what's called sacred. So we need to start thinking about changing our institutions to enable and empower people to more easily pursue that intrinsic goodness within themselves. And the idea that we can have the necessary cooperation to protect the climate, to address pandemics which don't carry passports, while we have institutionalized the legitimacy of obliterating other societies and civilizations, obliterating the future, is absurd. And nuclear weapons represent the apex of that absurdity. It's the apex of evil. And those who make them and are willing to use them honestly believe they're doing it to protect what is good and what is virtuous. Their motives are good. Their ideas are wrong. And those of us who see this clearly, we need to ask our political leaders, what are you doing to get rid of nuclear weapons? It's a legal obligation under the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. It is the unanimous holding of the International Court of Justice that there's a duty to negotiate their elimination. As Ronald Reagan said, they're giving me 6 minutes to decide the future of humanity is nuts. Nuts. That's why he was a nuclear abolitionist. Richard Nixon brought us the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. Pope Francis has stated most emphatically it's not just the threat to use, and the very possession of nuclear weapons is immoral. There's 115 countries in nuclear weapons-free zones. Those of us who want to work for the sanctity of the human family, for the elimination of these devices, we are the majority. But we've been in the closet. It's time to come out. It's time to let your sunshine shine. It's time to come out and say, we refuse to accept the false realism that we can continue to burn the planet and call ourselves just and human. We reject the false realism that says we can rely on nuclear weapons on a daily basis and not by accident, design, or madness see them being used. We accept the realism that our humanity, our sense of right and wrong can and will prevail. This is an aspect of faith in what is good, faith in where love is. So I would ask that every single person ask every political candidate 3 questions. What are you doing to protect the climate? because that involves economics, that involves a lot of things. What are you doing to protect the climate? What are you doing to eliminate poverty? We've never had the ability to eliminate poverty before in human history. Everyone can be fed. If it's not a problem of the productivity, it's a problem of distribution and justice. And 3, what are you doing to get rid of nuclear weapons? And then every one of us needs to ask ourselves, what am I doing to find the source of life and love within myself and bring it into action? If we have enough people asking those questions, I think we could make a difference.
And I think that I know you're right. And this has just been the most extraordinary 20 minutes of my life. I've been doing this for almost 6 years, and you are literally I think you're my favorite guest ever. So I thank you, Unify, and I thank you. Thank you, Jonathan Granoff.
Debbie, I think that what you're trying to do with this effort of platforming meaningful sharings is one of the best things that anyone can do.
Thank you.
And I think that if we all had that attitude of trying to bring out the best in others, we would discover that aspiration will bring out the best within us.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've discovered that this is your secret, right?
Yeah, you know it. I mean, I am grateful for how you see me, and I'm grateful for your words. I'm really grateful for the enlightenment that you brought tonight with this conversation, because quite frankly, I have just learned so much, and wow, do I ever appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. May God's grace and goodness fulfill the seed of grace and goodness that he's placed in those of us who are listening, because that seed, that longing is not given to everybody. The great Sufi master Rumi said, the evidence of prayers being answered is the increased longing to know reality. And my teacher, Baba Muhyiddin, a great Sufi master, said, separate from yourself that which separates you from others. On one level, of course, it's anger, falsehood, jealousy. And what brings us together is love, compassion, justice, and mercy. And those same qualities bring us together with each other and what's most precious within ourselves. And they actually bring peace amongst nations. They actually work. And when they're violated, as say they were after World War I, where reparations were piled upon the Germans and we received the whirlwind of Nazism, they worked in the Marshall Plan where our enemies were funded. Imagine, the United States funded Germany and Japan to recover. And what did we get in return? Trading partners and robust democracies. So even in the affairs of amongst nations, these principles work. They're not secret, but they've got to be brought to life with us. We are the people we've been waiting for.
I hope everybody that's watching is clapping with me right now. That was incredible. And I want everyone to know, if you look up into the comments and to the description, you will find all the links to wonderful organizations that are part of the anti-nuclear prayer, which starts on August 5th and August 6th. And it will be live from Hiroshima. It will be live from New York, live from the UN. It's going to be a super, super incredible 2 days. So we'll see you there. And I'm watching for you. So know that.